Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kaidi Tong. I'm an anchor and journalist at Pix 11 News in New York City. It is a great honor to welcome all of you to the National ACE 2021 AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. Our theme this year is empowering AAPI businesses. We're always stronger when we work together, right? On behalf of National Asia Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce, also called National ACE, thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is to connect AAPI business leaders and entrepreneurs with elected officials and policymakers from both sides of the aisle in a bipartisan effort to influence legislative change. The AAPI Strong Legislative Conference is a place for our unified voice to play a crucial role in our economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as from anti-Asian hate and violence. We're thrilled that you've taken the time to invest in our AAPI community. This is an opportunity to learn from congressional leaders and officials in the Biden administration. And more importantly, this conference will reveal how public policy, advocacy, procurement, and equitable access to resources will make us stronger together. At this time, I would like to welcome Chi-Ling Tong, President and CEO of National ACE, to deliver the opening remarks. She is an inspiring leader and trailblazer in the Asian community. As the world grapples with unprecedented challenges posed by the pandemic and anti-AAPI bias, she has led the National ACE team and demonstrated her continued leadership in our communities to help AAPI businesses recover from the socioeconomic impact. Please welcome Chi-Ling Tong.
Thank you, Kaidi, for your kind introduction. You have been such a pioneer in the media industry for over decades. I salute you. Since our founding in 2012, National ACE has focused on improving the economic and social well-being of our community by working with policymakers, business leaders, and stakeholders to advocate for public policies that promote growth in our economy so that many AAPIs can be successful in create business opportunities and good jobs. AAPI small businesses are essential to communities, including healthcare facilities, restaurants, and convenience stores. Unfortunately, our community is facing many challenges, such as access to capital, language barriers, and technical difficulties. Now there's an added stress of hate, discrimination, and violence. We're dealing with two illnesses, COVID and hate. Therefore, in 2020, National ACE launched programming to support the business community get access to funding and remain resilient. We especially appreciate NBDA's CARES Award to make this possible. In 2021, ACE launched the AAPI Strong, a national effort alongside our 70 affiliate AAPI partners organizations. Together with our corporate and nonprofit partners, we are standing up against racial bias, discrimination, and fear that's plagued our AAPI communities. National ACE is focused on combating the nationwide rise in AAPI bias, harassment, and violence in our small business communities across the country. We conducted over 150 virtual webinar trainings and provided consulting to help over 16,000 small businesses recover, stay resilient, and to gain access to capital during the pandemic. Many of our corporate and chamber partners across the country have stepped up and taken action to help small business to recover, such as Grubhub, Verizon, Wells Fargo, EY, Comcast, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Toyota, and many more. We are humbled by their support. Again, I want to thank you for participating in our program today. At this time, I would like to welcome our board chair, Dr. Karen Ng. She will share with you what we have in store for the next 3 days. Thank you.
We are delighted that you have joined us for a seat at the table. We have a great lineup of topics and speakers in store for you. Today, we'll be talking about access to capital as we rebuild together. We will hear from various members of the administration, as well as a panel of experts who will be discussing public and private funding opportunities for AAPI companies. Tomorrow's conference is focused on our AAPI Strong projects as we strive to make a difference and have an impact in our AAPI community. We will have an AAPI legislative discussion with several prominent members of Congress. We will have a panel on the significance of strong diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that promote AAPI inclusivity. We will also have experts giving an outlook for AAPIs in the post-COVID economy. And we will wrap up the conference on Friday by creating a path forward for our entrepreneurs. We will spend some time on the importance of digital transformation, and our ACE Next Gen will give us an update on all of the programs that they have diligently been working on. As you can see, we have a great series of programs. So without further ado, let's get started.
Coming up later today, special remarks from United States Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Please welcome once again, National ACE President and CEO, Ms. Chilling Tong.
It is my honor to introduce the United States Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. As an economist by training, she took office after almost 50 years in academia and public service. She is the first person in American history to have led the White House Council of Economic Advisor, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury Department. She is also a professor emerita at the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley, and a distinguished fellow at the Brookings Institution. When she served as the president of Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, she spotted a worrying economic trend, a bubble in home values. When the housing bubble popped in 2008, Secretary Yellen helped to manage the resulting financial crisis and recession. On December 1st, 2020, then President-elect Biden nominated Dr. Yellen to the post of a Treasury Secretary. He said she has spent her career focused on unemployment and the dignity of work. She understands what it means to people and their communities when they have a good, decent jobs. Please welcome the Honorable Janet Yellen.
Hi, everyone. This is the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, and I'm very glad for the chance to share a few thoughts at your annual conference. This past year and a half has been difficult for everyone, but I know it's been an especially difficult period, and some days have been downright tragic for the Asian American community. The economic data tells one chapter of the story. The pandemic hit small businesses owned by Asian Americans harder than just about any other group. One study by the New York Fed and the AARP looked at business owners over the age of 45. It found that the number of Asian American small business owners had dropped by 19% in between January 20 and January 2021. And then there is the other, more infuriating chapter, the one with the violence. Among the pandemic's most tragic days was March 16th of this year, the day when 8 Asian women were murdered in Atlanta. It is undeniable. We have witnessed a rising tide of racist hate against people of Asian descent in this country. And it's a tide that must be named, countered, and reversed. If there's one thing that President Biden is committed to, it's that post-pandemic America cannot merely return to its pre-pandemic state. We cannot go back to tolerate the old biases again, nor can we continue to endure the long-standing structural problems in our economy, like the fact that many communities of color find it hard, impossibly hard often, to access capital, either to buy a home or start a business. For us at Treasury, that means injecting new funds into financial institutions that serve communities that the financial sector traditionally hasn't served well. The $12 billion we're now allocating for community lenders is more funding than has flowed through the CDFI fund since its creation in the 1990s. But this is just one of many measures, and all are just a start. We're now engaged in a great economic project, repairing the broken foundations of our economy, and on top of them, building something fairer and stronger than what came before. When all is said and done, I hope and I expect that you and your businesses will not only benefit from this new kind of economy, you'll also help to build it. Thanks very much, and best wishes for a successful conference.
Tune in tomorrow and hear from U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono and Congresswoman Grace Meng about congressional efforts to stop AAPI hate. Please welcome back the National ACE Board Chair, Dr. Karen Eng.
It is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Ambassador Katherine Tai. Ambassador Tai was sworn in as the 19th United States Trade Representative on March 18, 2021. As a member of the President's Cabinet, Ambassador Tai is the principal trade advisor, negotiator, and spokesperson on U.S. trade policy. She is the first woman of color and the first Asian American to serve as the United States Trade Representative. Prior to her unanimous Senate confirmation, the ambassador served as the Chief Trade Counsel and Trade Subcommittee Staff Director for the House Ways and Means Committee, where she played a pivotal role in shaping U.S. trade law and bilateral and multilateral agreements, including the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. It is an honor to have you here with us today, Ambassador Tai.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a great conference so far. Thank you to National ACE for inviting me to speak at this inaugural AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. For nearly a decade, National ACE has been an important voice for the AANHPI business community. Your advocacy work not only supports and advances the aspirations of today's AANHPI entrepreneurs, but also the goals and hopes of the next generation of leaders. This has been a challenging year and a half. The pandemic has tested us in so many ways. Businesses closed their doors, Americans lost their jobs, and we lost friends, family members, and loved ones. Meanwhile, a rise in anti-Asian hate crimes showed that while our country has made a lot of progress in combating hatred and xenophobia, a lot of work still remains. But there are signs that things are getting better. Earlier this year, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act into law, which will help to stem the anti-Asian violence our community has faced. In May, the president also reestablished the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, which is charged with driving an ambitious whole-of-government agenda to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for AA and NHPI communities. Even as I think about the collective challenges we face, I feel inspired when I reflect on the work that comes from our community. You have shown resilience in the face of racism and bigotry. You have persevered through a once-in-a-century pandemic. In the history of our country, we have faced obstacles and hardships, but each time we have emerged on the other side stronger. And that is why conferences like this are so important. It is a chance for our community to come together, to learn from one another, and to bond over our shared experiences and backgrounds. It is also an opportunity for me to share how the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative is empowering our entrepreneurs, and specifically our aspirational entrepreneurs of color. One of the priorities for the Biden-Harris administration is demonstrating that our government can tackle the biggest challenges that we face. We all know that trade is essential to a well-functioning global economy, and through bilateral and multilateral engagement with key trading partners, we can remove discriminatory barriers, raise labor and environmental standards, and address the pressing issues that will define the next decade and beyond. As the United States Trade Representative, that means developing trade policies that lift up our workers and our communities. For too long, trade has helped certain sectors while others have been left behind. To reverse this trend, my office is focused on a new worker-centered trade policy. By giving our workers a seat at the table, listening to their perspectives, and receiving their input on how trade has affected them, we can create more durable policy that delivers shared prosperity to all. What this means is making sure we incorporate your views and lived experiences as we develop trade policy. I am committed to ensuring that our small and medium-sized enterprises, and particularly those owned by women and people of color, are represented in our agenda. To facilitate these conversations, my team and I travel throughout our country to connect with people in their respective communities. What I often hear in my conversations with workers, entrepreneurs, small business owners, labor leaders, and farmers is that workers and businesses need help bringing their products to new markets, and that we are all looking for new opportunities. And that is why I have directed my team to intensify our work under our existing trade and investment framework agreements, which we call TIFAs, that we have with trading partners around the world. The list of 42 countries, economies, and regional organizations with whom we have TIFAs includes key markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Taiwan. We also have a trade policy forum with India to strengthen the economic and investment ties between our two countries. This engagement will help us strengthen existing economic partnerships while forging new ones in exciting and growing regions. I hope to work with your businesses and National ACE to ensure that our TIFA strategy benefits your work. Trade policy is also closely interrelated with the Biden-Harris administration's Build Back Better agenda, and specifically the president's infrastructure bill. The United States must maintain its competitive edge in the global economy. Our trading partners and our competitors are investing in their infrastructure and boosting their domestic sectors. We must do the same. This bill will benefit so many of your businesses. It will help you move products on reliable roads and highways and through upgraded ports. It will help you reach customers in rural communities through expanded high-speed broadband. And it will benefit the manufacturers, construction firms, and their workers who will help us complete a historic, once-in-a-generation public works investment. I know that given the tools and resources, our AANHPI businesses can truly thrive. The President's Build Back Better agenda will position your companies for success. That success leads to more jobs, greater economic growth, and prosperity in our communities. As United States Trade Representative, I am committed to making sure that our trade policy is a catalyst for greater growth and prosperity for each of you and the entire AA and HPI community. Thank you for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
All that and more as we continue our AAPI Strong Legislative Conference 2021. Please welcome the President and CEO of Cal Asian Chamber, Ms. Pat Fong Kushida.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pat Fong Kushida. I'm President and CEO of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to welcome you to the 2021 National ACE AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. I'm joined today by two esteemed congressional representatives, Congresswoman Judy Chu and Congressman Andy Kim, to discuss today's topic, access to contracting opportunities. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you. Before we get started, I wanted to briefly give a little background on Judy and Andy's bio. Congresswoman Judy Chu was elected to the House of Representatives in 2009 and represents California's 27th Congressional District. She sits on the Powerful Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Small Business Committee. Additionally, Representative Chu serves as the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, a position she's held since 2011. And Congressman Andy Kim was elected to the House of Representatives in 2018 and represents New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman Kim serves on the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and also serves on the Small Business Committee with Congresswoman Chu. So thank you both for joining me today and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So let's get started. One of the questions that we'd like to ask, there's a lot going on today with respect to small businesses, and certainly the pandemic, and for AAPI businesses in particular, combating AAPI hate. What are some of your priorities that you'd like to address within the small business subcommittee? And this is a question for either of you.
Well, I certainly first want to thank you for joining with National ACE and sponsoring this particular event. And it's so wonderful to be here with my friend, Congressmember Andy Kim. As you know, AAPI small businesses have been especially hard hit during the pandemic. And in fact, we were the first ones to be negatively affected when there were rumors about the coronavirus and customers started avoiding Asian businesses. So we want to make sure that AAPIs and other people of color get the opportunities that they need. Now, let me say, one huge priority for many of us are the two major pieces of legislation that will make such transformative investments in our country: the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill. The bipartisan infrastructure framework, which passed the Senate and then is passed, at least on the rule, through the House, includes many lucrative contracting opportunities for small businesses. And here's a notable thing: at least 10% of the funds must flow through small businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So this is going to provide so many opportunities for the AAPI community to get some of those contracts. But I'm also a huge proponent of the Build Back Better bill, which we will be writing in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And it will provide $3.5 trillion of investments in many programs that I think will be helpful to small businesses. They are things like a national paid family leave program, which can be so helpful for small businesses that need to be able to make sure that they retain their employees on the job through a paid family leave program. And for me, the priority also is on making sure that small businesses have access to capital. And that's why I am so glad to know that the Small Business Committee is planning to include my legislation around the Community Advantage Program. This provides loans to underserved businesses that cannot qualify for your traditional SBA 7A loan. And what it would do is to include people of color in the definition of underserved markets and require the SBA to make at least 75% of all these loans in these underserved markets. So it means that we can help the businesses that are in some of the hardest to reach areas.
Congresswoman Chu, thank you so much. And you're right, there's going to be trillions of dollars that are going to flow through for the infrastructure and the Build Back Better. So Congressman Kim, what are your thoughts around how our AAPI small businesses in particular can better access some of these funds?
Yeah, thanks, Pat, for raising that. It's something that I've certainly heard a lot about over the last year and a half. As mentioned, I joined up on the Small Business Committee in January 2019. I was really excited to do so. Had no idea what was about to come in terms of the pandemic, which has brought in a level of challenge to small businesses around the country, unlike anything we've seen in modern history. So the Small Business Committee that Judy and I have been on, has really transformed to be a central hub for so much of the outreach to the community. And when I, in particular, engage with API-owned businesses in New Jersey, in particular my home state, a couple of things really come to mind. I mean, one is that very early on in particular, but through this whole process, there was a disconnect, in terms of the challenges there. For instance, even when it just comes to, the languages in which information is provided, that was across all of the pandemic. It was difficult for AAPI communities to, especially those that are where English isn't their first language, to navigate the testing process for COVID, or, when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program. And a lot of these efforts that were happening so fast. These were programs that were coming out and being implemented within days and weeks. This was something that put them at a disadvantage, because we saw just how quickly the pipeline for funding for the PPP and other programs got full. And we saw this across the board with a lot of other issues as well. So, this was something that Judy and I made a big point on when we were engaging with the Biden administration as well, trying to make sure that there's a level playing field. That's what we're asking for here. There's a level playing field when it comes to small businesses. And then beyond that, trying to make sure that we pay particular attention to those that are most vulnerable and trying to give them an assist in terms of how they're able to connect in. So, there's no perfect system, I'll be honest. And, this is something that we're continuing to work at. But frankly, National ACE and other organizations like this, this is why there's so much value added with your groups, is because you can draw attention to this kind of support, work with me and Judy and others to be able to really highlight that and get that out quickly, because those connections are so important.
We're so appreciative that both of you serve on the Small Business Committee. And it's really interesting as we start to talk to our colleagues across the nation that do similar type work. One of the things that we hear over and over again is that, the federal procurement is difficult to access. And as you alluded to, Congresswoman Kim, even more so if there's language barriers. So do you think that, how do you think we can better hold government agencies accountable to goals that you all are requiring from our federal government with respect to a 26% goal or a 25% goal? How do we better hold agencies accountable to those goals? And is there better collaboration that can be felt across government agencies? And I'm going to turn to you, Representative Chu, to ask that question too.
Well, we know the combined goal for small business contracting right now is 23%. Actually, we had bills to increase that percentage. We know that it can be done. And you have pointed out that, in fact, 26% was awarded. I think it's time for us to increase the percentage of that goal because it can only help small businesses. But there is a whole system that has to be held accountable. There are people in each of the agencies, the federal agencies, that are supposed to be able to facilitate the awarding of these contracts and make sure that those who could qualify are in fact notified and that they are able to get through this process. What we need to do is to make sure that we have close contact, to make sure that the system is actually working for you. And if there are problems with that, then certainly Congressmember Andy Kim and I have the ears of the SBA administrators so that we can try to institute changes so that it can better serve your purposes. Now, Congressmember Kim mentioned PPP. I can tell you that when that first came out, we were glad that small businesses could get access to these forgivable loans. But what did we hear right away? We heard from so many of our truly small businesses, in fact, directly from National ACE, that the truly small businesses could not have access. And in fact, when they called the large banks with whom they had accounts for sometimes decades, they could not get the PPP loan because they had not gotten a big loan from those big banks and therefore were not their valued customers. And then we heard that there were publicly traded companies like Ruth Chris that actually got $20 million worth of loans. Well, that clearly was not what PPP was meant for. And so I was so glad to hear from all of you about the problems. And immediately we led a letter to SBA and Treasury urging them to institute new programs that would prohibit banks from picking and choosing which applications to process based on their clients and which loans would provide them with the most interest. And ultimately, we got a $60 billion set aside just for the community banks and the credit unions and the mission-based lenders to be able to provide loans to the underserved businesses. And the reason we did that is because, of course, these community lenders know the underserved. They know them very well and can make sure that they get the help they need. And as a result, actually, the PPP loans ultimately turned out to be successful and served a large number of middle to low income folks that had small businesses.
You know, we really do appreciate that leadership because you're right. The first tranche of PPP absolutely did not get down to the folks in a lot of our communities, underserved communities that were intended to get to, right? And so thank you so much for both of your leaderships, because when the CDFIs and those community banks and the alternative lenders actually were made a priority to get that money into our communities, it made such a huge difference. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And, you know, Congressman Kim, you know, Judy talked about the fact that we have to do a better job of holding our departments accountable, right? Holding them accountable in terms of what is the system doing and what isn't it doing, right? And so there was a study that was recently done by the Washington Post, I think, that really analyzed the 26% that we had received, that the federal government was saying that they had received, they had actually done this past year. And they did say that there is data that shows that there's a lot of, I wouldn't say miscounting, but, you know, putting contracts in the bucket of small business when maybe necessarily it doesn't belong there, right? And so how do we ensure that the data is right? How do we ensure that our contracting officers are really checking the right boxes to ensure that we are actually meeting those goals? And to Judy's point, you know, let's increase the goal.
Yeah, you know, it's really important, which is why I think the oversight role that we play, the two of us have and others have on the Small Business Committee in Congress is so important, because we have to show the federal government, the executive branch side, why it's important for this data to be accurate, and to show and demonstrate what that kind of consequence is if we do not have that right data in terms of how it's able to move forward. For instance, again, going back to that Paycheck Protection Program, we had such incomplete data, especially early on, about that, where businesses were not required to indicate, if they are a minority-owned business or a women-owned business, and it really hurt our ability to understand who we're targeting, whether or not this is getting out to the types of communities that we wanted it to. So it really impedes and impacts the performance. So, it's important for us to really set these benchmarks for the executive branch to be able to fulfill. So they're not just checking a box in terms of getting the money and the procurement of projects out there, but about making sure that we're doing it right, making sure that it's reflective of the diversity of our country and each of our communities. And look, it's tough. And having worked in the executive branch side, I understand the implementation. It can always be a challenge. So, we try to do this understanding there's no perfect system to be able to get this all out, but we at least have to try. So that oversight and that accountability, making sure that we're continuing to do our role, our constitutional duty, that's a huge part of it. And we're going to continue to work with National ACE and others to make sure that we're raising the right questions.
Thank you, Congressman Kemp. So, it's interesting because the census just came out and they talked about the growth of the AAPI community. And from 2011 to 2019, our growth climbed from 18.2 million to 23.2 million, an increase of about 27%. That's massive growth, right? So I guess my final question to each of you is, what do those numbers mean to you, and how can we better harness the collective voice of our community? So I'm going to start with you, Congressman Kim, and I'll let Judy wrap up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I'm excited by the numbers of just how strong the AAPI community is. In my home state of New Jersey, we saw huge numbers. I think it was upwards of 30% or more growth since 2010 for the API community here. And so I'm excited about that. I think it demonstrates just, the increasing, vibrancy of the broader community. But it's something that also makes us have to kind of take a step back. And this is something that Congresswoman Chu and I and others really looked at earlier this year when we were talking about the challenges facing, like the racism and the violence and the discrimination, is that we know that the AAPI community around this country is not monolithic. And, I think this data pushes us to have a greater nuance about where it is that we need to be focused on. What is it that we need to dig in deeper on and understand what kind of opportunities and challenges people are having. Specific to, the issues that we're talking about with procurement and others, for instance, I had a hearing when I was the chairman of the subcommittee of small business on economic growth and access to capital. I did a hearing in my district about small business opportunities to engage with government contracts, especially revolving around military bases, as I'm also on the Armed Services Committee. And, I really came to see the value that, for instance, these called PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, play in my community and places all over, places where people can turn to, especially small businesses can turn to help navigate the complexities of these different issues. So, I just raise that as sort of wanting to make sure that as we're seeing this growth in the API community, that we're matching it with the kind of assistance and support that is necessary for us to be able to ensure that people know how to best adapt and best take advantage of, some of the ideas out there. So that's what we need to make sure that we're doing. That as we see this growth, are we seeing commensurate growth in that kind of resource? Are we seeing PTACs and other types of resources available in API communities and places with dense minority communities and vulnerable communities. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when it comes to the data from the census, and what steps we take next is making sure that we're matching that growth in population numbers with growth in support.
Thank you, Congressman Kim. And Congresswoman Chu, how do we better harness the collective voice of our community?
Well, I too was excited to see the results of the census, especially since we had quite a few obstacles, if you look at it, with regard to COVID and also the citizenship question. There were many ways in which the Asian population might have been suppressed, but instead, what the results of the census showed is that there is tremendous power and potential of the AAPI population. In fact, today, the AAPI population is not only the fastest growing racial population in the country, it is also the fastest growing segment of the US electorate. And talk about being able to use our voice because of this. We had a real impact in this last election where there were historic surges in the AAPI voter registration and turnout. And in fact, the AAPI population turned out to be the margin of victory in key battleground states across the nation, including in Georgia. And this surge in AAPI voter turnout has led to historic increases in AAPI representation as well. Today, we have a record 21 AAPI members of Congress, which is our highest number ever. And in January, AAPI shattered one of the highest glass ceilings of all when Kamala Harris was sworn in as our first woman, Black, and Asian vice president in history. Well, as the first Chinese American woman elected to Congress in history, and as KPAC chair, I've made it a priority to ensure that AAPI leaders and all kinds of representatives are everywhere, not just in government, but in all sectors of American life, from the corporate boardrooms to Hollywood and everywhere in between. I so strongly believe that when AAPIs have a seat at the table where the decisions are being made, we can make a difference in so many issues, from addressing anti-Asian hate crimes to ensuring greater economic opportunities and prosperity for AAPIs.
You two are such role models. I have to tell you, as a first generation Chinese American, it was hard for me to find my voice. Because at a very young age, we were taught to assimilate and not necessarily from a cultural perspective to stand up and to stand out. And so you really, both of you are such great role models. And I think the final question that I would have would be, how did you both find your voice? What was it that made you, growing up as an Asian American, how did that happen? Either of you can start, but I'm curious to know how you were able to find your voice and be such strong, impactful leaders for the nation, for not only for the community.
Yeah, well, I'll just start here and just say, look, I'm still trying to find my voice. I'm still honing it, and I think, I try to approach this job with a lot of humility in terms of how I approach it. I think that's something I learned from my parents. My parents were people that just showed a deep love for the opportunities that they received in this country, and the fact that they were able to raise me and my sister in such a great community with great schools and give us these opportunities now. So, I think for us, my parents kind of had this line when I was younger. They said, service isn't just a job, it's a way of life. And they didn't mean just government service. They just meant about, in terms of engaging with the community, that we have a responsibility with each other. And I think that, I didn't know what those words really meant early on, but I think I just kind of really honed in on it, ended up becoming, a diplomat before a member of Congress. But it's that kind of, it's like, what's your anchor? Your voice is your anchor in that kind of way. So that's kind of how I kind of came to find my voice, but as I said, still working on it.
And I'll just say, being in elected office was the furthest thing from my mind. I can relate to what you said, Pat, because I never in a million years would have thought of myself as being in an elected office as I was growing up. But I was living in the city of Monterey Park, California, when an ugly anti-immigrant movement occurred. Immigrants were moving into the city, and there was a reaction against them, and there was an ugly anti-immigrant movement where they wanted only English on the signs in the city and only English books in the library. And then the last straw was when they passed a resolution saying that only English should be spoken in the city. So I joined with a multi-ethnic group of people who circulated petitions to get thousands of signatures to overturn it. And we did succeed, but it became so apparent that the city council did not represent the city. So I ran for city council and won, and spent the next 13 years working to bring together the city and have it appreciate its diversity. And one thing led to the other, the state assembly and then Congress.
Well, I am so thankful that you decided to run that many years ago. And thank you so much. I could stay another half hour and speak to both of you. Unfortunately, I guess our time is up, but thank you so much for your time, the giving of your leadership and of your knowledge, and just thank you. So appreciative of both of you.
Please welcome Mariko S. Carpenter, Vice President of Global Marketing at Nielsen IQ.
Hello, my name is Mariko Carpenter from Nielsen IQ, and I am a proud board member of National ACE, and it is my honor today to introduce you to the next speaker, Miguel Estienne. Miguel serves as the Acting National Director for the Minority Business Development Agency at the Department of Commerce. His 20-year professional trajectory in business and financial services was shaped by his time with GE Capital, where he structured multi-billion-dollar transactions and led general management efforts in the corporate lending space. In roles such as managing director, leading the working capital lending business in Mexico, and head of strategy for GE's commercial finance division in Latin America. In 2018, Miguel returned to Puerto Rico following the devastation left by Hurricane Maria to support the island's recovery effort via social impact projects such as Puerto Rico Live, a platform he co-founded that hosts live conversations with world leaders that inform, entertain, and inspire. Please join me in welcoming Director Miguel Estienne.
Thank you to Mariko and your team at National ACE for the invitation to speak at the API Strong Legislative Conference. My name is Miguel Estienne, and I'm the Acting National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency, also known as the MBDA, is an agency under the U.S. Department of Commerce. I would like to thank ACE for their ongoing partnership with the MBDA. CARES Act funding allowed the MBDA and ACE to partner in serving AP business stakeholders with training and technical assistance and reporting the types of impact COVID-19 had on minority businesses. As you know, the MBDA is the only federal agency solely dedicated to the growth and competitiveness of minority-owned business enterprises. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Asian American employer businesses accounted for 56% of all employer minority businesses, with Asian American businesses revenue accounting for nearly 60% of all. We recognize how challenging the past 2 years have been, and in an effort to better understand the pandemic's impact in your community, the MBDA is working on an AP business survey to collect data that looks at the impact of COVID. So how can the agency help right now? Let me share. The MBDA currently operates 45 business centers located in areas with the largest concentration of minority populations. Our business centers provide customized services, primarily in 3 areas: access to capital, access to contracts, both federal and corporate contracts, and trade, export-import. Working with one of our centers gives you, as a client, access to the resources of the entire network and institutions that are open and eager to do business with you. Please visit mbda.gov for more information and to find the center near you. I want to thank National ACE for inviting me to be part of this important legislative conference and for your long-standing commitment to your community, AP Small Businesses community. Looking forward to continuing this partnership. Thank you.
Don't miss an exciting conversation tomorrow on DE&I with a new NMSDC President Ying McGuire, and Chief Financial Officer of Toyota Motor North America, Tracy Doi. Please welcome the Associate Administrator at the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Entrepreneurial Development, Mr. Mark Madrid.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this remarkable invitation to join you for the AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. Energized to be here. I am Mark Madrid, Associate Administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development at the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA. It is the highest honor imaginable to serve U.S. small business owners under the bold and results-driven leadership of SBA Administrator Isabella Casillas Guzman. At the SBA, we are dedicated to serving all American small business entrepreneurs, and it is with great enthusiasm, energy, and empathy that we serve the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. The AAPI community has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, as COVID-19 has been challenging for your community. Moreover, hate crimes against members of the AAPI community have increased dramatically. Yet, out of this adversity, we observe your enduring resilience and determination. Your resilience and determination matter, and you are key drivers in our economic recovery. It is at this critical inflection point that we need leaders who are unrelenting in their commitment to advance equity, like my boss, SBA Administrator Guzman, and like this distinguished Congresswoman, Nydia Velázquez, who is also the chairwoman of the House Small Business Committee, and whom I have the high honor of introducing today. At their core, these two leaders of action share a commitment to making access to SBA resources more equitable to underserved small businesses. They have formed a strong partnership that has delivered results to small businesses, including the SBA deployment of additional billions of dollars to small businesses and nonprofits by extending PPP funding from March 31st to June 30th, 2021. The streamlining PPP forgiveness process for PPP draws less than or equal to $150,000. The rapid implementation and deployment of $28.6 billion for more than 100,000 restaurant grants. A revamping of the venue grants to save local music theaters and cinema, removing the arbitrary $150,000 cap on the economic injury disaster loans, EIDLs, to eligible small businesses with loan amounts up to $2 million. Congresswoman Velázquez, we thank you, your dedicated staff, and all the Democratic Small Business Committee members for drafting and passing out of committee the historic Build Back Better legislation. This legislation will significantly bolster SBA's loan, investment, and innovation programs. Congresswoman Velázquez, you have made history, and today you are making your mark, and you are doing so by ensuring the voices of U.S. small businesses are heard every single day. Friends, please join me in extending a warm and energized welcome to Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez.
Good afternoon. I am Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, Chairwoman of the House Small Business Committee. Thank you for allowing me to join you today for your AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. I have served as the leading Democrat on the House Small Business Committee for over 20 years. During my tenure, I have witnessed incredible growth in the AAPI community regarding business ownership. Over the years, the AAPI community has transformed into one of the most successful and prolific groups of entrepreneurs. On average, AAPI businesses earn the highest sales receipts of any group and boast combined sales of over $700 billion. Despite these incredible gains, AAPI entrepreneurs still have unnecessary obstacles to deal with. It is fitting that today's theme is Access to Capital Day. As head of the Small Business Committee, I have learned that capital is king in the small business sector. An entrepreneur's dream of owning a business is so often dependent on securing funding on reasonable terms. Unfortunately, access to capital is often unequal. Due to lack of access outside credit, AAPI business owners are more likely to rely on personal and family savings than traditional banks. AAPI entrepreneurs cannot unlock their full potential without consistent access to affordable capital. That is why on my committee, we're working to create an even playing field where all entrepreneurs have equal opportunity to attain funding for their business. We are doing this by empowering community lenders and strengthening the SBA programs that target underserved businesses. In 2020, AAPI entrepreneurs had a harder time securing emergency funds like PPP loans due to the lack of pre-existing relationships with big banks. My committee worked to deliver more aid to underserved groups throughout the year by empowering the lenders that serve their communities. We passed set-asides in multiple bills to appropriate funds so that community lending institutions could participate in PPP on equal footing with big banks. These reforms led to tangible results, with SBA data showing that community financial institutions were best able to reach underserved businesses. Now, I am working to advance policies that strengthen these institutions beyond the pandemic to allow them to reach more firms. I am also working to improve the SBA programs designed to direct capital to underserved groups. Earlier this year, the House passed 4 bills to make critical reforms to the SBA 504 and microloan program. These bipartisan bills will help get more capital into the hands of entrepreneurs, especially those owned by underserved groups. I am also supportive of efforts to obtain more data surrounding the demographic of small business loans. In August, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau announced a proposed rule that will require more banks to track lending data for small business loans. Efforts like this will help bring more transparency to lending and help the federal government ensure equal access to credit. I am grateful for ACE and all of you in attendance for the work that you do in advance the interests of AAPI businesses. I look forward to working with you to ensure that AAPI businesses have ample access to lending. Thank you again for having me today. I wish you a productive legislative summit.
"2020 was an unprecedented year for the virus, the flare-ups of anti-Asian discrimination, and the desperate search for economic recovery. Asian American small businesses, especially the mom-and-pop restaurants, were among the hardest hit by the economic downturn brought on by the pandemic and xenophobia. Of the 10,000 AAPI businesses recently surveyed by the Federal Reserve, 78% reported a decline in revenue, and 46% had reduced their staff. Nearly 90% of these small businesses said sales have yet to return to pre-pandemic levels. While everyone worldwide was dealing with the same challenges of a serious pandemic, AAPIs around the country were being verbally abused and physically assaulted. Anti-Asian sentiment reached new highs as attacks on Asian Americans and their businesses escalated.
Harassment of Asian Americans is a long-standing issue in the U.S., but as we all know, since COVID-19 began, or even before, incidents have been nonstop and rising. We have all seen videos and footage of members of our APA community encountering racist attacks, from verbal abuse to physical assault.
Stop AAPI Hate reported over 9,000 anti-Asian incidents from March 2020 to June 2021. Of the total reported incidents, physical assaults increased from 10.8% in 2020 to 16.6% in 2021. Faced with these challenges, Asian American entrepreneurs do not stand idly by. Instead, they come together to take their fight to the streets, to the White House, and to the halls of Congress with the help of National ACE. National ACE brings together its 70 affiliate partners and organizations to support the passage of the Anti-AAPI Hate Crimes Act. President Biden invites National ACE to the White House to discuss the unprecedented challenges confronting the 2 million AAPI businesses and entrepreneurs it represents.
For centuries, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, diverse and vibrant communities have helped build this nation only to be often stepped over, forgotten, or ignored. We see you. And we are committed to stop the hatred and the bias.
More than anything else, I want to express my solidarity to the AAPI community and to let you know that this sort of racism and hatred have no place in our country. And certainly we on Team Biden stand with you and are going to do everything that we can in order to stand up for you and against any sort of racism and discrimination.
A year and a half after the start of this global pandemic, our Asian American small businesses are still struggling to recover. National ACE has partnered with many corporate sponsors to develop grant programs to support AAPI-owned businesses. The AAPI Strong Restaurant Fund, in partnership with Grubhub, provided $2 million for 195 AAPI restaurants severely impacted by the pandemic. In Arlington, Virginia, Jinari Thai was one of the restaurants to receive a $10,000 grant.
We've been spreading water for the last 18 plus months during COVID-19, and this is going to help us immensely.
Il Chianti Italian restaurant in Henderson, Nevada was also a grant recipient.
I just want to thank you so much for the grant for National Asian Chambers, AAPI, and National ACE Grubhub grant, and we need it because we're struggling since last year. I just want to thank you all you guys for your support. Thank you.
Having conducted hundreds of trainings, workshops, and webinars, National ACE continues to support thousands of AAPI entrepreneurs by helping businesses with access to capital, contracting opportunities, and overcoming digital and language barriers. National ACE is preparing AAPI businesses to play a pivotal role in our nation's economic recovery.
National ACE has been a critical conduit for information and resources to the millions of AAPI business owners around the country.
Together with our corporate and nonprofit partners, National ACE is focused on combating the nationwide rise in AAPI bias, harassment, and violence in our small business communities across the country. Alone, we can do so little, but together, we can stand up for the future and success of our AAPI business communities. In these unprecedented times, it is clear that the spirit of the AAPI entrepreneur in America has not been crushed, but is now stronger than ever.
My name is Dalnhyun Kilbasa, attorney CPA. I'm a managing partner of the law offices of Kilbasa, Holmes & Anson, and I am AAPI Strong.
I am Eugenia Henry. I am the president of H2O Clinical Research, LLC. I am AAPI Strong.
I am Congresswoman Michelle Steele. I am AAPI Strong.
Hi, my name is Ian So. I am the co-founder and CEO of Chicken and Rice Guys, and I am AAPI Strong.
Hi, I'm Tom Canaden. Hi, I'm Howard Duncan. And this is Boogie. And we are AAPI Strong.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Judy Chu, and together we are AAPI Strong.
Hello, my name is Steve Chen, the co-founder of YouTube. I'm AAPI Strong.
My name is Tiani Josu, and managing partner of Playground Capital. I am AAPI Strong.
My name is Andrew Chow, co-founder of Boba Guys. I am AAPI Strong.
Hi, I'm Congressman Andy Kim. Together we are AAPI Strong.
I'm Angela Chang, the Chief Strategy Officer of my family business, KCAL Insurance Agency. I am AAPI Strong.
My name is Kaidi Tong, anchor and journalist at Pix 11 News in New York. I am AAPI Strong.
Together, we are AAPI Strong.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Healy, Vice President of Government Relations for Grubhub. Thank you for inviting me to share some remarks today. COVID has turned the restaurant industry on its head the last 18 months. And at Grubhub, we've been working hard every day to support our restaurant partners across the country. We know that the unparalleled diversity of cuisines offered by restaurants is an important part of the cultural fabric of every city across the country. And while every restaurant has been impacted by the pandemic, the AAPI community and its businesses have experienced a horrific and unacceptable rise in hate crimes and discrimination. All while they served as a critical lifeline for groups during the pandemic that needed access to meals, including first responders. Grubhub stands in strong support of the AAPI community, and we were proud to partner with National ACE as our Donate the Change partner for the month of May. Our Donate the Change program allows diners who are opted in to round up their bill at checkout, with the proceeds going to organizations supporting local restaurants and drivers, with Grubhub also matching donations from our Grubhub Plus members. Together, $2 million were raised throughout the month, and the funds were used to create the AAPI Strong Restaurant Fund, a grant program to support independent AAPI-owned restaurants across the country. We are immensely grateful for the generosity of our diners and are excited to share that nearly 200 AAPI-owned restaurants are receiving grants this fall to help them reopen their doors or expand their operations. Small businesses are the backbone of our country, and we've made it our mission to continue to help support them throughout this challenging time and beyond. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a productive and enjoyable time at the conference.
Stay with us as we continue our AAPI Strong Legislative Conference 2021. Please welcome Bank of America's Senior Vice President for Local Marketing and Corporate Affairs, Mr. Garrett Jin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Garrett Jin of Bank of America and also a founding board member of National ACE. For our company, our support of National ACE is an extension of our mission and purpose, which is to make financial lives better through the power of every connection. And for Bank of America, the power of these connections drive our work with small businesses, including serving 12 million small business clients, managing a $1.8 billion portfolio of loans and investments to over 250 CDFI partners, and investing in specialized programs, such as those targeting veterans and women-owned businesses. I'm delighted that you're taking the time to be a part of this conversation with experts and industry leaders on accessing the capital needed to grow our AAPI small business community. However, we know that today's environment is extremely challenging, and what started as a health pandemic has evolved into a deeper examination on the racial, social, and economic inequities that all our communities face, including the AAPI community. For AAPI entrepreneurs, this has meant navigating the health challenges of COVID, the social challenges of the rise in anti-Asian hate, and the disproportionate economic impact on neighborhoods and sectors that are heavily populated by Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So with that, whether you're an entrepreneur, a chamber, a corporation, the tools and resources that will be discussed on today's panel are critical in helping revitalize our Asian small business community. So not only do we need to do more, we also need to look at new solutions. So the timing for this conversation could not be more urgent. For Bank of America, we're exploring the use of minority-led venture capital, private equity, and minority depository institutions to infuse more capital into our communities. So the panelists and experts on today's panel will explore these and other approaches that are so critical for our communities at this moment in time. We're honored to have them serve and share their knowledge and expertise with all of us. So without further delay, let me introduce today's moderator, Henry Childs II. Henry Childs is the founder of the Minority Wealth Commission and the chairman and CEO of the MSSDC Business Consortium Fund. So with that, let me hand it over to Henry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Henry Childs.
I am the chairman and CEO of the NMSDC Business Consortium Fund. At BCF, we provide access to capital to certified minority-owned businesses. Prior to joining BCF, I was the national director for the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency. I'm glad here today we have a great expert panel, and we're going to talk about, to me, what the number one issue is for minority businesses, which is access to capital. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of our guests to shortly introduce themselves. Then I'm going to also ask them to briefly talk a little bit about the products that they have that their company is delivering. And then I'll give a little background, 3-year trend of minority businesses, and then we'll jump into questions. So what I want to do is I want to start with Jack, and then we'll go to Ruben, and then Jacob.
Thank you so much, Henry. On behalf of Administrator Guzman, Mark Madrid, who's our Associate Administrator for Entrepreneurial Development, and the entire team at the Small Business Administration, we're glad to join everybody today. Critical topic, as Henry, you just outlined for everybody. I've worked with the Small Business Administration for quite some time now, have worked in a number of our divisions, which include a technical assistance division, our finance division, government contracting, and we have a lot of other important roles we play, including disaster recovery. So really interesting and challenging time for both us, the government, and obviously small businesses. But we've got all of our resources and our focus clearly on small business recovery. So happy to talk about our current programs and what we're seeing out there in the market, and happy to join such a distinguished group today.
Great. Thanks, Henry. And Jack, thank you for your service at SBA. And Henry, thank you so much. So great to be on a panel with you. You're a change maker in terms of this space, and appreciate all the work that you've put into it. I'm Ruben Morales, Wells Fargo. I'm Senior Vice President for External Engagement within our new Diverse Segments Representation and Inclusion group, which is an enterprise-wide organization within Wells Fargo that's really forcing the issue to focus on diversity and inclusion internally in the organization for our 250,000 Wells Fargo employees, for our customers, for our suppliers, making sure that the business decisions that we're making include an element of diversity and inclusion in their core. And so that's why I'm so excited about being here with you. A focus on diverse small businesses, diverse small business owners is something that we really care about. And I'm really proud of our track record to date and what we're looking at doing in the future in terms of helping those small business owners.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Shu. I'm the CEO of a company called Catalyte, headquartered here in Baltimore, Maryland. We're a technology company that actually has a technology stack that enables us to discover and detect talent that comes from anywhere, right? Talent that has this exceptional aptitude and potential to become great software engineers. We then invest, retrain, and advance their careers of people who actually come through this program who go on to become exceptional software developers. And our business model is that we essentially retrain people and we put them to work delivering engineering for companies all over the United States. The benefits that we bring to them is that we can bring essentially an offshore cost structure here in the US with American software developers. We also bring diversity. Right. We bring a much more diverse workforce, especially in the technology fields. And lastly, we can actually create engineering pools and talent pipelines anywhere across the United States. So it's really, this is the fourth company I've led. I've run 3 others before this. So I have a lot of experience in terms of capital, and I've raised capital from early stage, seed stage, all the way all up to private equity and IPOs. So looking forward to getting into the topic today.
All right. So let's get into the topic today, because anybody that knows me knows that I am just, when it comes to access to capital, I really think that there is no bigger issue, no matter what you're talking about. If you're talking about, growing your business, I don't care if you're large, dominant cap business or small business, you're going to need the capital. But so what I want to do to kind of frame the discussion is I want to do a 3-year snapshot of minority business lending pre-COVID-19, and then we'll jump into some of the issues today. So the 3-year trends that we had going in for minority businesses pre-pandemic were great. We saw that minorities were starting new businesses at a much greater pace than non-minorities. But the problem was that these businesses were not scaling. Now, AAPI businesses were doing better than some of the other demographics, but they still were not doing as well as some of their white counterparts. So, and that's why when the national shutdown happened, we saw minority businesses really become devastated. We saw from February to April, we saw about 40% of these minority businesses that just shut down. And there really wasn't anybody out there that was to provide access to them to help them unleash their growth. Now, we know that SBA, and I'm glad that Jack's on, we know that SBA provided a lifeline with some of their PPP loans, but when the private sector came in, we didn't see until about June after the George Floyd murder, where we really saw a huge investment. We saw the likes of Wells Fargo coming in with some of their programs. Thank you for that, Ruben. So what I really want to talk about it, because access to capital is a buzzword, but I really don't think a lot of people really truly understand what makes it so hard for large financial institutions to deliver access to capital to small businesses in particular. So what I want to do is I want to start with Ruben to talk about some of the challenges of, Wells Fargo, $1 trillion under assets, to really develop a product for, a small business with, $1 million or less in revenue.
Yeah. So, we all recognize access to capital is really the issue. It's the lifeblood for, as you say, Henry, small companies or large companies alike. And I think, one of the systemic issues that makes it hard for small businesses sometimes is those business owners might not really have the knowledge that they need in terms of, the different types of access, different types of capital, how you can raise it. And how you finance your own business. And so you see folks using credit cards or, loans from family and the like, which might work for some folks, but others really need help. And I guess my main point is, and what we learned from the pandemic more than anything, from my perspective, is small business owners need to develop a relationship with a banker. It doesn't have to be a Wells Fargo banker, but develop a relationship with somebody who knows money, how to gain access to capital. And it's not meaning just go to the bank and, ask for a loan. To, find out who's out there. And there are CDFIs, there are banks, there are chambers of commerce, there are groups like ACE, where ahead of time you can start building those relationships and learning more about how you can build a business plan that makes sense. So that when you come to Wells Fargo, you might find it's all automated. You might not have anybody initially, if you just walk in, so to speak, or click on, it's all automated. You put in your numbers, and you might not get the result you want. You might not get the loan you want. So you want to be able to talk to someone who can help you figure out how best to plan and how best to structure, what you're looking for.
Ruben, that's great. That's a great intro to Jack, because I cannot stress how important it is to have a good relationship with your banker. And we saw that again during the national shutdown when the government developed some programs to help small businesses. The PPP program was a great program, but we saw that you had to have a relationship with a banker to access some of that. So Jack, can you talk about on your end from SBA, you guys have great programs, whether it be 8A or 7A, it came out with the IDA loans. So can you just talk about some of the resources SBA has to unlock capital for minority businesses?
So the SBA does provide a lot of different products, right? Many of them are tailored through legislation or programmatic crafting with our lending partners, and we continue to sort of work on them. But Henry, you just mentioned a couple of our acronyms that we use. So if you're kind of sometimes an insider, if you're in the world of finance, you're familiar with these combinations of letters and numbers. But as Ruben just highlighted, not everybody sort of is very well versed or has a lot of deep experience in the world of finance, right? Many people in entrepreneurship sort of jump in there due to a passion. They might bootstrap, borrowing money off of a credit card or from family. But once you get introduced to the banking system, then you learn perhaps some of these acronyms. So the SBA has these institutional lending programs that we work with banks on. 7A, which is generally operating funds that a small business will need to start or grow their business. Some criteria in terms of the business plan that you might work with a SCORE mentor or a small business development center with. So you're ready to approach a bank and perhaps get one of these loans that are backed by the U.S. government. We have longer term loans that might be more built for fixed assets. 504 is one of those. So these are sort of long-term 30-year type loans with very generous terms. Again, backed by the U.S. taxpayer through a federal program. And then we have some micro lending programs too. Ruben had mentioned earlier, the relationships within banking industries are very important. So we've spent a lot of time historically, and especially during this recovery period, diversifying the type of lenders that the SBA is engaged with. So the micro lenders, the CDFIs, the credit unions and organizations like that became very important. As we saw early in the pandemic, there were some communities that were not succeeding in terms of getting access to some of these loans. I had conversations, three-way conversations with some friends who had small businesses and dialed in their banker, right? When the banker had the relationship, they were very responsive. They jumped on the call. It was a little bit unannounced and that stuff, but I could tell from the conversation, the banker was very familiar with the operations of the business and what was going on and how they were trying to adjust. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case in many communities or subsections of some of the demographics, including minority owners that had not had these banking relationships. So Congress, the SBA, and other federal partners engaged CDFIs, credit unions, and these other organizations that I just mentioned. We did see a serious uptick in a lot of these communities being able to access that capital so they could sort of continue, maintain, keep some employees on, or pivot if they were having their business pivot during their recovery stage. So we've been working a lot on that. Obviously, awareness of these programs, critical that we have partners, ACE, a new program that we're going to launch soon called Community Navigators. So we're really sort of almost doubling or tripling our own infrastructure that are often housed at nonprofits or universities with more community-based organizations. They might be faith-based, smaller chambers of commerce and other organizations that can help point people in the right direction. If you have an initial hurdle, maybe you've got credit issue, they're going to be able to counsel you quickly through that so you can get really prepared to access some of the capital that's still available for small businesses. And then we've all realized that the digital storefront that we all utilize is critical. SBA uses a pretty nice tool that we like called Lender Match. So if you don't know your area lenders or a lender that's sort of comfortable with your industry, you can go to sba.gov, find Lender Match, type in a couple of requirements, and it's going to filter through thousands of lenders to see who might be a good fit for you. That'll just expedite you connecting with that bank or lender to make sure that you can apply for a loan, maybe build that relationship to build an ongoing roadway to success for access to capital and other needs you might have. So a lot of talented people working on this, and we look forward to bringing new resources very soon.
All right, Jack, thank you very much. All right, Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you because, we just heard about, large financial institutions stepping up. We heard about the government stepping up, but I know your background is in venture. And we know how important it is to get the money you need at the earliest stages. I mean, if you look at the top companies in the S&P 500, most of them, came out of, that seed funding round. So, and we saw in 2020, surprisingly, it was a record year for venture capital. But only 1% of that funding went to minority owned founders. So Jacob, how do we unlock some of this venture funding? We said we want our businesses to grow. So how do we get some of that money when they need it the most in these early stages?
That's a great question, Henry. And so I've got two comments, right? Number one is I think one of the biggest, and I think Ruben and Jack have both mentioned this, is that oftentimes, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur or first-time founder, is just understanding why do you need capital, right? Oftentimes when you hear about people looking for capital, they immediately think about equity capital, right? Or they think about bank debt. And, there's different uses of capital. Like when do you need it, right? Do you need it to expand your go-to-market, right? Do you need it to fund your core operating? Do you need some factoring, right? So finding out what type of capital you need is really important. But yeah, you mentioned this thing about venture, which is really the world that I come from, right? And, you'll find that there's a reason. There's actually a structural reason why very little venture capital goes into minority businesses, especially minority businesses focused on the public sector, which is that, and I think, you look at the 8A program, right? To qualify for it, you need to be a majority owner of your business, right? Very, very few venture-backed companies have founders who are majority owners of their business, right? Mark Zuckerberg does not own a majority of Facebook, right? Bill Gates does not. Bill Gates owns less than 15% of Microsoft at this point. And so what ends up happening is that you end up by taking on outside investors, you actually disqualify yourself oftentimes from that sort of set aside sort of status, right? And so I think that's something structurally. I've actually had conversations with people inside commerce, around this particular issue of, if we really want to encourage diversity in the public sector, well, let's look at diversity of workforce versus the diversity of the founder, right? Because the diversity of founder, yes, you're creating a diverse founder-owned business, but you're actually hampering the growth of that business by kind of creating this particular hurdle in the public sector. But yeah, going back again, when I sort of look at sort of a lot of venture-backed companies, oftentimes, what makes venture-backed companies dynamic is the fact that capital coming in is risk capital, right? They're much more open to enabling early stage companies to take risks, to figure out what we always like to call product market fit, or figure out your go-to-market, right? Or figure out your revenue model, right? Oftentimes I find that a lot of minority businesses, again, in the public sector, don't have that same luxury, right? They have a business that they've got to run. And so oftentimes you'll find that the pool of capital that really they're focused on is bank debt.
So let's stick there. And I'm going to open this up to everybody, but Jacob, I want you to chime in, because let's just talk about what you just talked about, venture capital. What also they're looking to fund is businesses of the future. And especially post-COVID, more than ever before, there's really two types of businesses, right? We have your digital businesses and then what I like to call your analog businesses. And you see that reflected in the stock market. If you look at your top 50 companies, they all underwent their digital transformation 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? And that's why when the economy shut down, if you're in a food service delivery, guess what? I'm a restaurant owner, but guess what? I have Uber, I have DoorDash, I have whatever. I can get my products to the market. If you're a small owned business, if Henry Childs has, a local restaurant and my customers can't order food online or I can't deliver it to them, I have to shut down. So the key part that gets left out of the access to capital discussion is digital. So can we just talk about how we can help AAPI businesses and other minority business owners, undergo the digitalization of their businesses? Because if we don't do that, then no matter how much capital you pour in, it's not going to be going to growth.
Henry, I think that's a great point. If I can sort of add a couple observations quickly and defer to Jacob and Ruben. But my exposure to the world of venture, I think the statistics are the statistics, right? That a lot of it is geographically clustered in the United States for various reasons, but at least for the last decade or so, probably longer, includes sort of not a closed door approach to many communities, but not the access awareness, the positioning, the introductions, the understanding, and how to navigate these investment opportunities. So on the SBA front, folks that may be familiar with our small business investment companies, which are SBA sort of backed or associated venture funds, our small business innovation and research program where federal agencies are setting aside by requirement a certain percentage of their procurement activities directed towards new innovations and technologies. People often think of NASA, in terms of this program, but as it was earlier mentioned, the new realities that we're dealing with health, science, and other technologies, it's a great program to be aware of. And we've been working with a number of organizations to make sure everything from, we are looking at whether it's a small business investment company, the ownership structure of those firms, right? Can we promote, include, or develop minority owners even within those funds, right? I know we've got some of us have spent time in the Valley, which is the classic case, the Valley, Silicon Valley, and San Francisco, and some of these other hubs in Boston. Don't always have diverse faces around the table, whether it's a pitch session or what have you. But more of these federal programs, and I'm also observing some of the incubators or other sort of hubs that drive some of this digital technology and new innovations are becoming more diverse. And let's not forget also from a gender perspective, So women founders and women investors. There's some development programs out there at universities and other hubs that are slowly materializing. I hope that they're going to make more progress. SBA is obviously at the table promoting that. And we hope to see through partnerships, whether they're entrepreneurial hubs, lenders, or other communities, more progress in this space.
On a more retail basis, I would definitely go to the Henry Childs restaurant. But to help, restaurants like that become digital, I really go back to technical assistance and help. I think it's, younger generation entrepreneurs, they're going to be more attuned, obviously, but helping existing businesses and reaching out. It's one thing Wells Fargo did with all the PPP funds that we collected, the fees that we collected. We turned around and put all that back into either CDFIs or technical assistance or a new program that we're going to be focusing on coming up, all focused on AAPI and other diverse small businesses. But I think a lot of it is, we've got to reach out and encourage these folks to become engaged with whether, it's with the SBA, small business development centers, chambers of commerce, other groups that have resources that can help them figure out how to use some of these tools.
Yeah, and if I think about digital transformation, at least from my point of view, it's, today, there's lots of things that you can talk about digital transformation, whether it's, AI and plugging into external data sets and all that. I think at a fundamental level, there's sort of like the first step of digital transformation is just automating a lot of manual processes, which is really the lowest hanging fruit. Again, this, I've been running business for almost 30 years now. And I can tell you, like, the ways that we used to do marketing, demand side stuff 10, even a decade ago is fundamentally different, right? You almost have to throw out your books that you learned, 10 years ago to how it's done today. From plugging into external systems, be able to leverage sort of external sources, and sort of really targeting and focusing your sales teams. And I'd start really beginning the fundamentals, right? Thinking about what are those barriers to scalability for a company. Really, first, I think the demand side, those are the easy things, right? So really starting to figure out how you actually start automating the demand side through sort of automated sales processes. In my world, it's really also around talent, right? And so to give you a sense with our company, with Catalyte, our entire process in terms of discovering and recruiting talent, to training that talent, to advancing and tracking their performance and helping them to improve and advance their careers on the job, that's all automated, right? We don't even have human recruiters in the company, right? And so again, you have to sort of start looking at, okay, what are those fundamental areas where you're adding value and where you're touching the market as a company, and find ways. Really, the lowest hanging fruit is just starting to automate a lot of that stuff. And the good news today is that, you don't have to spend millions of dollars on ERP systems to do that. You can really kind of plug into SaaS-based systems like the Salesforces of the world, to be able to have a pretty complete out-of-the-box capability if you know what you're doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to transition. I'm going to throw this to Ruben because, you all highlighted great stuff. But, when you're in the trenches and, I talked to minority business owner and they're like, oh, Henry, it's great. How do I keep up with it? Technology is just changing so quickly, whether it be artificial intelligence, blockchain, virtual reality. We have, automated vehicles now, and they're just really looking to manage the day-to-day of their businesses. But I think, Ruben, I'm going to bring it to you because I think it's important, something that you mentioned earlier, not just with the technical assistance, but how these large financial institutions are really looking at their DEI differently. You mentioned that now you and your office report directly to the CEO. That's a huge change. I don't want our audience to miss that because, in the past, you would be off, DEI team would be off somewhere, right, in the corner.
In HR, yeah.
So can you talk about the evolving DEI and how that helps financial inclusion?
Yeah, definitely. So again, looking at DE&I, not again as a human resources challenge, if you will, as kind of, I think in the past it's often been, but saying this is, we've got to be, it's got to be a key part of our business. And I know a lot of businesses have said that in the past before, but we actually, I'll give you an idea of how important it is. Senior leaders at Wells Fargo, part of their compensation is going to be based on reaching DE&I goals. And we're even looking at, disaggregating the data. It's not just say, do you have more minority employees? It's how many African American, how many Latino, how many AAPI. I mean, really, delving deep and saying that and other objectives related to DE&I are part of the compensation evaluation. So it's really a part of the business. But taking a step back, it has to be. I mean, look at America. America is becoming more diverse, and small businesses, which are small businesses that are growing. I can point out Latina-owned small businesses, are increasing at an incredible rate, and so we know that our customers are going to be diverse. Our employees are diverse, and so we just, if we want to be a viable company years and years in the future, we need to figure out how we can make our business meld with the demographics of what's happening in the world, which includes with small business owners.
The last question, and this is for each of you. Obviously, you can do your 1 minute, talk how great your company is or the products, and I love that. But really, I want to know, what lesson did you learn past this global pandemic, and how is it going to help you, reach your clients more effectively? And I want to start with Jack, then we'll go Ruben, and then we'll go Jacob.
Sure. Thank you, Henry. I think the lessons that I learned or my colleagues as we sort of talk as a team and try to align services as best we can is that something we already knew, but it was great to be reminded that entrepreneurs are resilient. They're very, creative. Their needs are diverse. The owners are diverse. The staff are diverse, but they're very resilient. We saw great stories out there of people helping their communities, helping one another, pivoting in a number of ways. I think, as a federal agency, and our administrator reminds us of this daily, to make sure, we're keeping our customer at focus. This is something, if you stopped into a SCORE chapter or a small business development center as a small business, they would remind you. But we remind ourselves that we too need to focus on the client, what he or she is saying. Right. We can design things, but we need to hear from them and react, try to do our best to make things frictionless or easy, making sure we're complying with legislation, other rules, but really staying attuned. Sometimes that's high tech. Sometimes it's very low tech. Right. We need to make sure we have people that can pick up a phone still or use some new tools with AI or chat functions. But we need to be as diverse in terms of delivering the service to a diverse audience base as possible. And the story doesn't end tomorrow. It's something that we need to bake in to everything we do and commit ourselves. And the more we, as a civil service, have diverse staff with different talents, experiences, and cultures, the better we do at that.
I think I go back to get to know your banker, or, get to know someone you can trust, whose business, whose job, whose avocation is access to capital, that they know that world, and get to know them just as you would ideally, have a lawyer, someone who, can help you with legal issues, with accounting issues. You need to, as a small business person, develop your network that can help you, especially during these tough times, and that there are a lot of resources out there. And I know I know that it can feel very lonely being a small business owner. Just keeping up with trying to keep your business going. But there are resources out there through, again, SBA, your bank, the chambers of commerce. And so, take the effort to try to find those resources that can be helpful to you.
Yeah. And I guess, what I learned through through COVID, through the pandemic, and frankly, it sort of really informed how we think about the future, is that, this is just the beginning. Well, this is probably the biggest example of massive change. And we're all like, now when you think about digital transformation, this is going to be continuous, right? So we're probably not going back to the way things are, the way things were going to be, right? At the same time, very few of us probably have very much of a crystal ball into the future. So the important thing is that need to be able to stay adaptable, to be opportunistic. Many years ago, there was this book that came out that had a big effect on me called Anti-Fragile, which was this book written by Nicholas Taleb. And it was an interesting concept, right? Is that a lot of companies think about resilience, right? So I hit a crisis, I want to bounce back. Well, a better way actually thinking about it is actually those anti-fragile companies where you hit a crisis and you get better, right? And that's the orientation that we actually had. The culture that we had going into the pandemic was, yeah, the sky is falling. And clearly, you know, we got beat up quite a bit through COVID, but our leadership team also pulled together and really had to think about, how do we bounce back better, right? How do we actually build a better business through COVID? And the great news is, you know, a couple quarters into the pandemic, we came out of it, we powered out of it much faster. So we actually end up growing much faster coming out of it. We embraced the virtual remote culture, right? And actually added about 10 points of gross margin to the business, you know, which felt even more margin accretion to the bottom line. And so it helped us to fundamentally rethink about our business despite us being beat up through it. Right. And I think if we think about sort of, you know, the companies who've ultimately become most successful, you know, those companies that you sort of see, the Fortune 100 companies, they're the companies who can surf these waves of change. Right. This change is going to keep coming. Right. It's going to be wave after wave of this. Right. And you can't let it crash over you. You got to figure out how to get on top of it and surf each of these successive waves of change that are coming.
I will thank all of you. I appreciate it. The lesson I learned is we really need an ecosystem. And I think that you three on here together really show the need for true public-private partnerships because the public sector doesn't have all the answers and the private sector doesn't have all the answers. And we saw through this great pandemic the power of ecosystems and how we can work together to really help minority businesses do good for themselves, their employees, and their community. So I thank you. If you want to get in contact with any of these great guests, National ACE will provide everybody's contact information so that you can plug in and learn more to grow your business. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Be sure to join us tomorrow as we hear special remarks from the Deputy Assistant to the President and AA-NHPI Senior Liaison, Erica Moritsugu.
Please welcome National ACE Policy Committee member, Mr. Albert Shen.
My name is Albert Shen, and I am a former Obama administration official as the National Deputy Director of the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. It is my distinct honor to introduce a true champion and fighter for minority-owned businesses, U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth. She has been a longtime friend and fellow advocate for underserved communities. Senator Duckworth's journey through her military and governmental service is a testament of her dedication to civic responsibilities and compassion for the global community. I cannot think of a more inspiring leader that never gives up the fight for equity at all levels. I live here in Texas, and we have a saying, don't mess with Texas. But the more important saying is, don't mess with Senator Duckworth of Illinois. She is the real deal. Welcome, Senator Duckworth.
Hi, everyone. It's Tammy Duckworth from Illinois. I just want to thank the members of the Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, and of course, Daniel, for inviting me to participate today. First of all, I want to thank each of you for the work that you are doing to support AA-NHPI business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders across the country. For all your work to connect folks to resources, access capital, help them grow or start their businesses, and strengthen their ability to not only survive this pandemic, but to thrive in the months and years ahead. Thank you. After a long, difficult year for our community, please know that the work that you are doing matters. It is making a difference and making our country stronger. Everything you do is necessary on our path to truly achieve equal representation in every corner of our society. Over and over again, it's proven true that representation matters, leadership matters. With stable, effective, and empathetic leaders once again in the White House and majorities in both chambers of Congress, Democrats are proving again and again that we will roll up our sleeves and get things done that actually help working Americans, regardless of the color of their skin. We know our nation's small businesses and communities of color are among the hardest hit by this pandemic. And that's why earlier this year, we got the American Rescue Plan over the finish line to provide additional emergency relief for struggling business owners, including an additional $7.25 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, that we created in the CARES Act and more. This came after December's bipartisan COVID relief deal, which targeted aid specifically for disadvantaged and minority businesses who had been largely shut out from accessing relief provided in the CARES package. The deal included major investments such as $25 million for the Minority Business Development Center's program, $57 million for microloans, and more than $284 billion towards the PPP program, including funds for first and second round PPP loans for borrowers that have restrictions on eligibility to ensure this desperately needed funding reach minority businesses, smaller companies, and those most in need. These bold investments went a long way towards helping minority and disadvantaged businesses stem their economic losses as a result of COVID-19, and we're just getting started. More recently, Senate Democrats passed a bipartisan infrastructure deal to help create good-paying jobs, in addition to our ongoing work to pass a bold, historic budget that would deliver long overdue tax cuts for working families, ensure our nation finally joins the rest of the industrialized world in providing paid family leave, and build back an economy that works for everyone. While we've come so far, some things too have not changed for the better. In the aftermath of Donald Trump racializing the COVID-19 pandemic, our community continues to face harassment, racist discrimination, and a truly awful spike in hate crimes. The Stop AAPI hate group is even projecting that the number of anti-Asian hate incidents this year is set to surpass the over 4,500 reported incidences received last year. And we know the total number doesn't even begin to capture all the attacks that have gone unreported. Not only is this despicable, but we know these hate crimes are cut from the same cloth that led to the internment of thousands of innocent Japanese Americans mere decades ago. This vicious cycle of hate and discrimination against AA-NHPI community has to stop. I'm proud that President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act into law and that he appointed Erika Moritsugu as a senior advisor, but we must do more. Not only do we have to pass the rest of President Biden's economic plan to build back better for all Americans, we have to call out hate whenever and wherever we see it. We have to uproot systemic racism and create real change. We can't be silent. We can't be complacent until everyone recognizes that Asian Americans are Americans and that our contributions to this nation are part of what makes this nation so great. That's one reason why diversity across our workforce and at the highest level of government is critical to understanding the struggles, challenges, and unique needs of the communities that we serve. It's not just about having our voices heard. It's about having a seat at the table so the unique needs of our community are included in important policy decisions that affect all of us. With just 50 Democratic votes, the Democrats' Senate majority is on a knife's edge, and I'm going to need each and every one of you to help me keep my seat, grow our majority, and keep up our work to ensure that our government is as diverse as its people. Together, we are stronger. Together, we can elect leaders who look more like the people they represent and who reflect all of our values and respect all of our cultures. Each and every one of you has done and will keep doing your part, I know. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Keep it up. I hope to see many of you in person as soon as it is safe to do so. Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome CEO and President of Ashford Conics and Chair Emeritus of Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce in Michigan, Ms. Grace Lee.
My name is Grace Lee. I'm proud to introduce Congresswoman Young Kim, who represents California's 39th district in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was born in Incheon, South Korea, and moved to the United States when she was 13 years old. As an immigrant, small business owner, community leader, and mother, Congresswoman Young Kim is proud to be one of the first Korean American women ever to serve in Congress and help all Americans have the chance to achieve their dreams just like she did. The Congresswoman has dedicated her life to give back to her community. She served as the ranking member of the Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development Subcommittee at the House Small Business Committee. She is also a longtime community leader who fights to grow jobs, support small business, ensure public safety, promote educational opportunities, support veterans, and protect victims of domestic violence. As a small business owner, I really appreciate the Congresswoman's strong leadership and advocacy for the AAPI business community. Please join me in welcoming a great leader in our community, the Honorable Yang Kim.
Well, thank you, Grace. I really appreciate you for that kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Yang Kim, representative of California's 39th Congressional District. My district includes parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. I am grateful to the Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship for putting on this incredible conference and for inviting me to share a few words with you. Let me first commend the tremendous leadership of your president and CEO, Dr. Chilling Tong, and your board of directors chairwoman, Dr. Karen Ang. You ladies rock. As one of the first Korean American women to serve in Congress, a former small business owner myself, and a member of the House Small Business Committee in Congress, I am very excited to join you today in paying tribute to the resilience and the strength of the AAPI business community, which we have all seen over the past year in particular. While hate and bias targeting the AAPI community is not new, there is no question that we saw a rise in hate crimes targeting our community during the pandemic. Sadly, nearly 4,000 cases of hate crimes were reported over the past year, many of which targeted seniors. And sadly, we cannot legislate hate out of people's hearts and minds, but we can enforce the law very firmly and stand strong as a community. I'm glad that earlier this year, the House came together to pass a bipartisan bill to help federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies better address these recent hate crimes. Our small business owners and entrepreneurs were also hit hard by the pandemic with lockdowns and other restrictions. California was hit the hardest, with nearly 40,000 small businesses closing, and half of those closures permanent. Across California and the nation, small businesses have had to adapt to keep their doors open in the face of these unprecedented challenges. However, despite the many hardships, Asian American entrepreneurs have not only found ways to survive and keep their business going, many of you have also lent a helping hand to others in your community. I've heard many stories of AAPI business owners serving on the front lines, donating masks and other PPE, brought meals to those in need, and helped community members and neighbors get through the pandemic. I understand the hard work and sacrifices each of you and entrepreneurs around our nations have made over the past year. And I know in my heart that our country is far better off because of the ability of business owners like each of you making our communities a better place. As ranking member of the Small Business Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development, I am working hard in Congress to fight for small businesses, create jobs, cut red tape, and promote workforce development opportunities so we can get people back to work and our economy back on track. I'll keep working hard on behalf of our entrepreneurs and on behalf of all of us in the AAPI community. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to speak to you during this AAPI Strong Conference. Together, I know that we can create a better tomorrow for all Americans. We are AAPI Strong together. Thank you.
Please welcome the Chief Operating Officer of National ACE, Mr. Daniel Oliver.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. Nisha Ramachandran is the Executive Director of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, also known as CAPAC. She was recently appointed to this position in July of this year. Nisha also previously served as the Policy Director for the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans and as an APACS Fellow in the office of Congressman Ami Bera. A longtime community organizer and advocate, Nisha made history when she was appointed as the first South Asian American to serve as CAPAC's Executive Director. Throughout the years, National ACE and CAPAC have built a strong relationship based on our mutual goal of empowering APIs in all facets of their lives. Because of our partnership, we have brought API priorities to both the executive and legislative branches, resulting in legislation and policies that benefit the API community as a whole. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Nisha Ramachandran.
Thank you, Daniel, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. What a fantastic first day for the National ACE Legislative Summit. My name is Nisha Ramachandran, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, also known as CAPAC. Our caucus was founded in 1994 and is made up of AAPI members of Congress and those with large AAPI constituencies in their districts. We have a strong dedication to promoting the well-being of the AAPI community, which includes educating other members of Congress about the history and contributions of AAPIs, protecting and advancing the civil and constitutional rights of all Americans, and ensuring that legislation passed by Congress reflects the concerns and needs of the AAPI community. Today, we've had the opportunity to hear from leaders across the public and private sectors about the importance of ensuring equitable access to capital across the board. We also heard from influential AAPI leaders, including CAPAC's chairwoman, Judy Chu. As many of you know, CAPAC and National ACE have enjoyed a strong and successful relationship built upon empowering and uplifting AAPIs. CAPAC has worked diligently with National ACE over the last year and a half to support AAPI entrepreneurs who have been impacted by the dual COVID-19 and hate pandemics that our communities face. This has included working across the aisle and with congressional leaders to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which created a new position within the Department of Justice to crack down on the wave of racial bias against the AAPI community by facilitating expedited reviews of COVID-19 hate crimes and issuing guidance for state and local law enforcement to establish online reporting in multiple languages. We're proud of this work, and we continue to work with National ACE to reduce and one day eliminate AAPI hate. We have also worked to ensure that relief reaches those who most need it. AAPIs are some of the most vulnerable to the negative effects of the pandemic, and as a congressional caucus, we work to promote access to capital and contract procurement for our communities, in addition to promoting workforce diversity measures to create a more even playing field for AAPIs. Our caucus also works closely with the Biden administration, providing guidance on our community and pushing for change that positively impacts AAPIs across the board. We know that AAPI businesses have a profoundly positive impact on both our national economy, as well as local economies and communities across the country, and we're committed to ensuring their success. I'll wrap up my remarks by congratulating National ACE on a successful first day of their inaugural legislative conference. It is no easy feat to bring together as many voices as National ACE has for this event, which really serves as a testament to their mission. Over the course of the next 2 days, you will hear from influential AAPIs who will discuss the response to AAPI hate via the AAPI Strong campaign organized by National ACE, as well as the path forward for AAPI entrepreneurs as we enter a new phase of the COVID pandemic. Thank you to National ACE for hosting this important event and for having me. I look forward to continuing our work together on behalf of the AAPI community.
This concludes day one of our conference. Join us again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern as we examine National ACE's AAPI Strong initiatives and how we find our voice to make a difference in our AAPI community. Thank you, and we'll see you again tomorrow.